to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And man, again, just shout out to the Philadelphia Union for holding off all this news while I was away on vacation. Now I'm back, and now I have time to, write articles, to podcast about all this news, and to be joined by people, not only you guys in the chat, but two guests tonight. Yes, not one, two guests tonight, and super excited to have these two guys join me. And we did a show maybe a month or so ago over at AAT Sports, and now we come over here to the Free Kick and do it. And José Nuñez has been joining me the last 9 episodes now. And so I don't know, it's become so comfortable having José here on the show. And then also joining José and I is Mark Kelkenberg from Kelkenberg Sports. Mark and José, thank you guys for joining. How are you guys doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for the invite. It's good to see Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm back after the draft. That never happened.
No kidding. My God, what a change.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, poor Philadelphia Union just don't know what an MLS draft is, but you guys did a fantastic show, and hopefully people in the comments and people that are listening to this on the podcast feed, hopefully they checked out that episode. You guys did a fantastic job with the live feed, Mark, and we're already 2 minutes in here, and look at us. We're already hyping you up for the work that you do, so well done with all your draft profiles. And yeah, I mean, a big part of bringing you on tonight, and like everybody sees from the show title, Jovan Lukić, a new signing the Union are finalizing. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But the first official news that came out was Jack McGlynn traded to the Houston Dynamo. And before we even talk about that, I got to say, I'm in the process of getting an intro made for the podcast, a new intro, I should say, and coming out with maybe like some kind of video and everything where I don't have to just be on the screen and then you guys are listening to the music. So it would be something proper where, I don't know, it's some video you guys see and then I come in. And Jack McGlynn was actually going to be one of the players that I featured for one of the 3 goals because I want to keep with that theme where it's 3 different goal scorers. And I'm so glad that I didn't send that off for edit now that Jack McGlynn's been traded to Houston Dynamo. But that came as a surprise to me that Jack McGlynn was traded within MLS and not sold abroad. But the more I think about this, and shout out to Kyle and Jillian Almany, who I see her in the comment section here. I was on their podcast last night talking about the Jack McGlynn deal, talking about the Lukić deal, talking about US Open Cup, a whole bunch of different news topics. And so if you guys want to listen to that episode after you get done with this episode, I'll leave a link in the show description so you guys can go ahead and talk about that. But yeah, I was talking with somebody and they said they actually would be more surprised if Jack McGlynn was sold outright out of MLS as opposed to inside MLS. And once this person told me that, it got me thinking. And so maybe I shouldn't be surprised that Jack McGlynn's been traded to Houston Dynamo. It's been reported that it's $2.1 million going to the Union, a sell-on percentage, which Jonathan Tannenwald from the Philadelphia Inquirer reports that it's 50%. And then another $1.3 million can go back to the Union if certain performance-based metrics are met. First, I'll go to you, José. Seeing this news, Jack McGlynn no longer a Philadelphia Union player. How shocked were you when this started all coming out? And I'm sure your friend was ringing off the hook.
It was kind of fascinating because I think Mark and I had just posted, or I should say Mark had shared his video, and then I posted about Jovan. We sort of tried to coordinate that a little bit. And I remember being on the phone with you, Todd, to ask you a quick question. I was like, wait a second, my phone just vibrated. Like I got a message, and it was somebody, and this was before, I think, Bogert and some other, I guess the actual announcement came, obviously the official announcement, but asking you like, I think there's something cooking between the Union and Houston, and you're like, who the hell would they want? And we sort of like tried to piece it together, and then next thing we know, it's like, oh my God, it's Jack McGlynn. And then just texted a couple of people and they're like, yeah, it seems like it's far along, can't say anything, that type of thing. And then as I was typing away sort of like what the actual post was going to be, it officially came out via Bogert and I guess Jonathan Tannenwald as well. So I was shocked more than anything that it was within the league. than external departure. So I'm sure we're going to talk about what maybe it looks like for him in Houston, but I think high level it totally makes sense. It just doesn't make sense that it's within the league when you think about the prospect that he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'll go to you, Mark, right? Where Jose and I are in this thing pretty much, it feels like 24/7 covering the Philadelphia Union. And yeah, you've definitely got involved more so in the last year or so with the Union, but somebody that's essentially looking from the outside looking in. I mean, how shocked were you to see that Jack McGlynn, who was one of the Union's standout players last season in a terrible season for them, gets traded within MLS and not sold abroad?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously some of the representation moves, and they're probably sitting around talking about, what does it look like to take in all these different offers, and I think for his long-term career, not to keep doubling down on it, the move makes sense for him because just the style of play will suit him more. It can showcase more of what he's about in a more possession style than the expectations of the new coach and having the high intensity, high work rate, kind of just everything on the go, all action. Like he kind of doesn't fit that. And I mean, Ernst has always said, like, we're not going to block players from having a beneficial move to their career. And I think the price was right for them. Maybe they know more about the offers that they were getting. But it's not just the club that gets to make the decision when a player's on a contract. So I'm sure there were conversations with the agent to come up with a strategy of, hey, if we can go somewhere that you're going to be a star, you're really going to showcase your true attributes, then we find those moves abroad. And yeah, I won't get too much into some of the representation things that I've kind of heard, but just from like the previous stint. But yeah, I think that's like kind of what I see.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there, which I'll go to you, Jose, for this question is, Mark talks about the representation from the agency. And so before this gets announced that he's going from Philadelphia to Houston, Jack McGlynn gets tagged on Instagram by a brand new soccer agency or an established soccer agency, Super, I believe the agency's called. They represent Diego Luna out there in RSL. Jack McGlynn was with Rock Nation. And so once you see that, okay, it's announced that Jack McGlynn's changing agencies, and then a few minutes later, it's announced that the deal had went through. And I think that's always a good representation when you see a player changing agencies that's not just for the sake of, okay, I'm going to change agents. It's because they believe that that agent's going to go ahead and get them a move or a better contract. And in this case, it happened to be a move. And you can talk to this, I guess, Mark, and I'll get to Jose. That's pretty typical with this, right, Mark? Where it's players changing agents and then they wind up moving clubs.
Yeah, exactly. I think the move between or from one agent to another or agency, it usually kind of tips the hand that a move is imminent because, I mean, when you're in the middle of a contract and you don't really want to go anywhere, I mean, there's really not much an agent can do for you. And obviously, well, I think Rock Nation was changing their managing director or whatever the title is. So there's probably a little bit of uncertainty there as well. So they could just look for a more stable environment. And yeah, I mean, who knows what like a lot of those conversations happen. A lot of players can change agents at any given time. So kind of normal, but yeah.
Jose, I'll go to you. I mean, seeing that news that he had switched from Super to Rock Nation, catch you by surprise at all?
A little bit. I mean, we sort of heard rumblings in a way, and as I'm scrolling through Rock Nation, The first MLS player I saw on that list is Leo Chu out in Seattle. If he's still with Seattle, I don't even know if he's been moved or anything. I haven't kept up with the Sounders. But the other thing to keep in mind is too, him being allowed to go on that international break with the U.S. while everybody else that was, potentially called to go do international duty during the January window was not allowed to go, was blocked per se, was sort of another way to sort of, tip the hand of what was maybe coming. But with the commentary of, agency changes, I don't know if you remember this, Todd. We did the exercise of going through how many agents Kai Wagner changed and since he joined the Union, and obviously hasn't equated to a move, but that doesn't mean that they haven't tried per se. But yeah, I wonder, Rock Nation is an interesting agency as I'm learning more about them leading into the show and even scrolling through today, because they have a lot of talent, a lot of international talent. You can't bat an eye at, you have to recognize, right? Kevin De Bruyne, Lucas Paqueta is also there. So like some very, very talented players, but there you go. Leo Chu was, well, he's wearing a Seattle Sounders jersey on the picture. So that's immediately what I recognize. But yeah, I also have to wonder, right? Like how much of this was also driven by the player, right? I think Mark sort of started to allude to it, right? Like maybe this is what was best for him after sitting down with Bradley Cornell after the January camp, right? Like, is this what makes the most sense for him and for the club? And I would go ahead and guess so, because I can't imagine that, Ernst Tanner goes ahead and trades a player for this amount if it wasn't, sort of what was best for all parties, just because they have to appease everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up, what's best for all parties, and Ernst Tanner in the statement that the club released to the public once they officially announced the deal today. For people who may not have saw it, the statement reads, "We want to thank Jack for his dedication and contributions to the team, both on and off the field," said Philadelphia Union sporting director Ernst Tanner. "Over the past 3 years, he has been a key part of our midfield, and we are incredibly proud of his growth. At this time, we believe this move is best for both the club and Jack, allowing us to use the significant proceeds to reinvest and refine our roster while placing him in an environment suited to his play style and continued development. We have no doubt he'll enjoy a successful career, and we look forward to following his journey." And yeah, I mean, I think all three of us here can agree that you go from the Philadelphia Union, where they want to play a high press system, and that's been pretty clear. We've heard it the last couple of times that Ernst Tanner spoke to the media. Bradley Cornell spoke about it, whether it be through official Philadelphia Union channels or through press conferences. Hey, look, this is the way we want to play. We want to play this standard high press soccer, what we started playing in 2019, 2020, parts of 2021. And yeah, you can still say the Union played part of that pressing system in 2022. And I think as the years had went on, the Union had went less and less away from that. And I think part of that is, and especially in 2024, where whether it be injuries, whether it be because the Union are conceding first, because the Union are constantly down, Jim Curtin changed that system where they got Jack McGlynn on the ball as often as possible to let him dictate the flow of play, even though this roster really wasn't built to play that way, because a lot of these players were brought in to play a pressing style of system. But my argument, and maybe one of you guys want to chime in and say, no, I'm absolutely wrong, or maybe somebody in the comments, is this roster had stayed together for so long. And when you're playing a constant high press style, of course, players aren't going to be what they once were 3-4 years ago. Of course, it's going to take a wear and tear on the body. And then you look at the travel in MLS, you look at playing in the hot, grilling summer times in Philadelphia, away, in Texas, wherever. I mean, the elements in MLS, that's not good on anybody's body. And so when you want to play 90 minutes high press soccer and expect to run it back for 3-4 seasons in a row, it's not going to look the same that it did when Ernst Tanner first got here. And so Jack McGlynn goes to a system in Houston with Ben Olsen where he's going to play as one of those 2-6s, where you can let him sit deep, be the quarterback to say, and just spray that ball all over the field. And Mark and I were talking, and I think we talked a little bit about this on Kyle and Jillian's podcast, where it's going to be key for Jack McGlynn to go into a system to play as a 6 and show the world that, hey, look, I am a good 6. I am a good 8. where I can play really well in this type of system where, yeah, I don't have as many defensive responsibilities as maybe I once had in Philadelphia. I can just sit deep. You get me on the ball and I'm going to pick out the pass. And so if Jack McGlynn can show, hey, look, this is the kind of game, this is the kind of style that suits me, that transfer fee that the Union 50% that could potentially come back, that's going to be huge for this club. And so I do think the club did right by obviously themselves getting something rather than nothing. And then Jack McGlynn goes to a style that's more suited for his play style. And I think, at least myself, I thought Jack McGlynn would be going to Europe and not within MLS. But regardless, at least the Union is sending him someplace that's going to help his career, that's going to help his playing style.
The one thing I'll add that was sort of hidden in press releases or certainly wasn't mentioned by the Union, and they have no reason to, but was pretty apparent on the Houston Dynamo's press release, was the fact that Jack will be a U22 player, which means that whatever his salary ends up being, he will only hit the cap at $200,000, which to me means that Jack probably got a healthy raise of some sort, right? Whether it was just his contract for this coming league year for 2025 bumps him into that category, or he's in that category and went ahead and accepted it, or that's where they placed him, or we don't know and he signed something else, right? Like he signed a contract extension with a new deal and now he lands at U22, which all along you could argue that he probably was that, just tucked away as a homegrown. The way that Quinn just got that tag himself in this past offseason, but the Union decided to never mention it until Wasserman said it on Instagram. So I think that's another piece. So if it is an increase in salary, again, thinking about how does this advance the player, and that honestly may be a big piece of it, because I know, Mark, you and I have riffed about it quite a bit in the past, and in terms of prospects, and Todd, you and I have talked about it in terms of the reality of the sport, right? Like their professional careers are so short that you have to maximize your earnings as much as you can. You're literally one injury away from never playing again. So you can't fault a player for going and trying to get his bag and take care of himself and his potential future family. So again, just an aspect that doesn't get talked about so much that maybe was a driving force behind it all.
Mark,
I'll say it'll probably hurt the Union fans throughout the season, because I mean the projection, obviously, like you guys know Jack really well as a fan base. So I think with the new system that he'll be in, he could very well be one of the top performing midfielders in the league, and yeah, that'll sting for sure. But you always just kind of have to go back to what you said, Todd. The system will definitely favor him, and I mean, obviously, I've said it yesterday or a couple days ago. But I'm always rooting for the success of the players, no matter what. So, yeah, and obviously you can't fault a good player for the Union and all his contributions just because he ends up moving to a different team, or whether it was 100%, 50% his decision or not. So, and I don't get that vibe from the fan base that people are upset with Jack. So that's obviously kind of a moot point, but yeah.
Yeah. And you brought up a point there, Jose, where you were talking about the salary becoming a U22, and Ernst Tanner had said sometime during last season that, yeah, you could look at some of our young players and look at them as U22s without that official tag. Quinn Sullivan, like you said, Jose, officially gets that salary bump. It's so weird that the Union never announced that in their press release, but that's neither here or there. At least Wasserman did, and now we know that Quinn Sullivan's one of two players that take that spot for the Union. But looking back at Jack McGlynn's salary, he made $226,000 for the Union, which was 17th highest on this roster. And so many times Ernst Tanner, Jim Curtin had talked about, you don't want to bring in a high profile player here where they're making so much more money than the next guy, because essentially when you do that, then everybody else is going to be asking for the paycheck. And now you're killing your wage structure. Maybe you kill your culture in the locker room, but still to see Jack McGlynn as only the 17th highest paid player last year, I mean, it's kind of highway robbery in a way. I think, Jose, because of how much productivity you got from him the last couple seasons.
I mean, you remember the exercise we did in terms of the 22 under 22 list. That was it. Charlie Boehm with MLS that put together. I know he was sort of in charge of that feature throughout the year. But Jack was pretty high up there with the Diego Lunas, if not, surpassing him in some categories and making a heck of a lot less than most of those guys. And if I recall, Todd, I think Olwethi Makanya was making more money than Jack this year. So, for what it's worth, when you think about actual contributions for the first team, that has to be something to keep in mind as you think about, once again, players only have one career, so they got to maximize their earnings as fast as they can.
And I wanted to throw this to Mark. So, I mean, looking at Jack McGlynn's career with the Union, he made his debut at 18 years old against Saprissa in the CONCACAF Champions Cup in a 4-0 Philadelphia Union victory. And I believe that was down in Costa Rica. I mean, 18 years old, making your debut for the first team in CONCACAF against a pretty decent Costa Rican team. I mean, that tells you the talent, the belief that they had in this kid coming up through the academy into Bethlehem Steel / Union 2, and then eventually into the first team.
Well, yeah, what was that?
Right. Just, I mean, the talent, right? 18 years old, you make your debut against Saprissa, and then you look and see that, okay, look, this guy obviously is talented, but never really fit into the Union system. But still, I mean, it was never a question about Jack McGlynn's talent for me, right?
Yeah. And it's just a testament, I guess with all the other sports, I think, namely like basketball, but obviously for soccer, it's even more apparent because, I mean, there's so many teams around the world. So the teenagers that are in the first team are clearly there because not only are they technical players, but they can actually handle the physicality of a top tier league. And it definitely bodes well for his future. Someone asked in the comments, I'm not sure if they were wondering if there was going to be a projection of where we think that he can be sold to Europe for, maybe with that the 50% number coming into mind, but just to get an idea of what the future total will be. But I mean, if he shows out the way he should, based on obviously his long early career, with that new system, like I said, I mean, you'd have to assume that a player like that in that position could probably go for 8 if he just left after, just based on some of the other top American players that are being sought out.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you caught that comment. How much do we think Houston could possibly sell him to Europe for? And so one thing that we didn't touch on at the beginning was, okay, so yeah, the Union get a 50% sell-on clause from Houston. So let's stay with that $8 million. And so $4 million would go to Houston, $4 million would go to the Philadelphia Union. But then it was reported by Tom Berger, Jonathan Tannenwald. You got confirmation from this too. I believe, Jose, you had said privately to all of us that New York City get 20% of whatever the Union get from that $4 million. We're staying with that. And then New York Red Bulls also get 20%. And a lot of people were upset about this. And I don't think that I understand why it's a thing, because the Union broke MLS territorial rights. And I'll go back to you, Mark. I think the whole MLS territorial right things are so stupid. This is a league that wants to, do well by the players and get these guys sold to Europe eventually. But at the same time, too, you have these territorial rights. And I don't think that's helping players. I think the players should go to the best teams that are looking out for them in terms of development. I look at the New York Red Bulls. I look at the Philadelphia Union. I look at the FC Dallases. Montreal seems like they're going all in on youth this season, as opposed to, not saying that the Atlantas, the LAFCs, the Inter Miamis don't invest into the academy, but they're clearly at a different level where they're paying $10+ million for players bringing into the roster and then finding high level TAM guys and not so much building the rosters from academy players. And I think personally, MLS should just get rid of that rule. It's helping nobody. And Jack McGlynn was never going to join either one of New York Red Bulls or New York City. If he wasn't going to sign with Union, he would have went to Europe because he had that Irish passport. And so, again, Mark, I'll go to you, then I'll go to Jose. I mean, how do you guys feel about these MLS territorial rules that have been in play for a while now?
I mean, I've said it a million times, just covering the college game, I think. I've always been pro player, and, you can't really control exactly where you grow up. And, I know guys from the Buffalo area and even the Charlotte area that went out to Kansas City to be a part of their academies, and I don't think that there's any issue there. But obviously these things happened before Charlotte FC became a thing. But yeah, I mean, if a team wants a player, just get the player. And if the territory that they exist in passed on them for whatever reason, or couldn't give them a good offer, or never even found them, it's that shouldn't be rewarded. So I don't like the territory stuff. I hope it goes away because it just helps and it might already, because I already know, that FC Cincinnati have a scout in the New York City area and for the academy, and you wouldn't be sitting a guy in a place if you had concerns about territory rights. So it's better for everybody, the clubs, the teams, the players for sure. And yeah, even the scouting, obviously. So you get better prospects throughout the national team as well, because you're actually able to scout other areas, and it's a bunch of teams with a bunch of eyes everywhere. And that's what I think we need as a country, and at the end of the day.
Jose?
I see why it was in place early on, right? And when the league was trying to just survive in a way and trying to bolster their academy, create the pipeline, et cetera. And that's fine. But I think at this stage of where the league is, which you could call it MLS, whatever, 4.0 at this point, maybe 5.0 with Messi and what it looks like after he leaves being 6.0, it probably is time for it to be retired, because it should not take unbelievable situations with family members to force these clubs to do it, right? And give them the ability to make these switches. And really should not be, as Mark said, you shouldn't be penalizing a kid because he was born in Ohio versus in Philadelphia, right? It doesn't make sense. Or a kid was born in Utah, but wants to be in Philadelphia with the Union Academy because they believe, and his family believes in the system, right? That they would be going in. So I do believe that it's time for them to go, and ultimately it'll benefit everybody. And those clubs that do value and appreciate and do it right and do it well will continue to thrive. And those that never really cared for it, never really invested in it anyways, will continue the status quo, right, of what they've been building and or I should say not building, and continue to just operate the way that they have. So, or maybe, as Mark said, maybe this is what the shock in the system for them, that maybe realize, oh, okay, well, we don't have to just focus on Utah, for example, or whatever, Denver, and we can just go everywhere. So I sense that this is maybe a conversation to have closer to now. Maybe I think changes are happening very quickly, but certainly by 2028, when the new CBA is due to be negotiated.
Yeah, absolutely. And LA brought up a point a little bit ago. He said Ernst himself said that he needs $5 million to place Jack McGlynn. And shout out to Renee Turner, who I know is listening to this either live or back on the podcast feed. He was talking about this quote on social media today. And I had forgot where we heard this, and then Renee went back and found it on the Dupe. And so Ernst Tanner did essentially say exactly that he needs $5 million if he is to replace Jack McGlynn one of these days.
If I would need to replace Jack McGlynn, that would cost us probably 5 million or more, so that makes
wow.
And then you have no guarantee if the player is better, in addition to that. Yeah. It's our academy, our second team development is a good thing.
Yeah, so I mean, you heard it there from Ernst Tanner himself. He said that the Union need $5 million to replace Jack McGlynn. And I think that's probably a good segue coming up here, talking about Lukić. But I do want to bring up the Union's outgoing transfers the last two windows. And going back and looking at this, it hasn't been great for the Union. They've sold or lost 10 players in the last two windows. I'm including this current window that we're in. And as things stand in most European countries, the transfer window is closed. I haven't seen anything reported that the Union have lost any players. But to Europe, that is. And there's other leagues in Europe that close in a couple of days, but all the main ones have closed pretty much right now. MLS's window doesn't close until April 23rd. And a lot of fans I know are pretty negative that the Union haven't made anything official right now. But if you just look at the last 10 players that have left the club, you have Julian Kranza, who went to Feyenoord, lost him on a free. You get a small sale percentage once he's sold from Feyenoord. You sold Damian Lowe to Saudi Arabia for $200,000. Jose Martinez was sold to Corinthians for $2 million. Leon Flock left on a free to go to Poland. Jack Elliott left on a free to go to Chicago Fire. Joaquin Torres, free agent, hasn't signed anywhere yet. Matt Real, Colorado Springs Switchbacks. That was a free transfer. Sam Adinran, Lask. He's also left on a free. Brendan Craig, he's a free agent who's currently with CF Montreal, who the Union had just announced that they will play on February 14th in preseason, along with FC Cincinnati on February 7th down in Clearwater, Florida. And then Jack McGlynn, the latest, traded to Houston Dynamo at $2.1 million. But all in all, 10 players, you've only made $4.3 million on them. And yeah, a lot of these guys were acquired through funny money, through GAM. So it's money that you essentially didn't have. It's MLS's terms of, their money system. And then you look at Leon Flock, he was bought from St. Pauli for $250,000. Jose Martinez bought from Zulia, for $300,000 in 2020. And so you make $2 million on Jose Martinez, you make a profit there. But all in all, I mean, a lot of guys the Union have lost on a free without making any sort of profit. And when I look at that, that's not great business there. And I'll go to you, Mark.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that $8 million hypothetical we kind of talked about. So if we figure out exactly what the 20% means, it looks like the Union would take back 2.4 of that 4 million, assuming that the 20% is valued off of the 4 million and not like just the Union get 30% or 30%. So, or not even 30, it'd be 10, which isn't that just can't be how the deal was done. I think Jose, you might know more about it, but yeah, $800K each to the New York teams, and then 2.4 for the Union. So if the fee can be higher than 8 million, then they'll get that $5 or the $5 million figure that was just kind of thrown around.
Todd, as you were listing these names, immediately my thought was, man, that's a lot of salary cap space, in terms of what some of these guys were making. And sure, you got to take into account Danley's salary, the bonus, or I should say the new contract that Andre Blake got himself last year. That's obviously now going into his, I guess, second year. But I think at one point, Ernst over the summer, was it the town hall, sort of mentioned, we're strapped in a way, right? Like we just can't make a lot of moves right now because of the way that some of these contracts are. And, you know, it's been speculated and maybe pontificated a bit too, but like some of the contracts that they give to players after the 2022 run, maybe were not the greatest when you think about, you know, Glesnes, right? And what that means for him, and potentially another raise certainly for this coming year. And obviously they've slashed also Alejandro Bedoya's contract from the year prior to this past year. I wonder what he signed on for this year on that 1-year deal. All that to say that there should probably be plenty of cap space. It's just, you know, that the union will just continue to operate the way they are. And maybe in my head, it's Stockholm syndrome in a way, but like, I understand the sandbox that they play in, and I'm okay with it because I continue to just operate by it and understand that they're not going to go find a Cucho who is at that status right now and just bring him in. They're going to develop that player, right? They're going to go ahead and find that player early on and make him a Cucho if they can and move him on. Because I don't know, I understand the Philadelphia mindset is that we got to win right away. But the reality is, in soccer, in soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, it's not as easy. It's difficult, right? You can't just. Every club is a selling club except Manchester City, Manchester United, and some of these big guys, right? And that's just the way that soccer operates. So I just don't. I don't know what people expect, and that's the difficult thing for me. And I try to be so neutral in it all, but this past weekend was just so telling of, man, like, just give the guy a shot, right? I know we're gonna talk about Jovan in a minute, but like, the guy hasn't even set foot on the field, and people are already discounting him. And what player wants to play for that?
Yeah, so I mean, what a better way to segue into talking about Jovan Lukić, a Serbian midfielder who, look, a lot of these deals that Ernst Tanner brings in, nobody's heard of, and a lot of those guys hit, and yet still people don't want to trust Ernst Tanner, which I get, and I said the last episode, right, Jose? I understand why some fans may feel like the trust is broken between them, Ernst Tanner, the front office, just because of the way that the season went. Didn't bring in players that this franchise wanted. And Mike, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your comment here. I mean, he says, don't worry, guys. We might maybe have found a random Serbian player in the bargain bin, and he might be okay. And guess we'll see. And so, Mark, you had put together a nice highlight reel on your Twitter, on YouTube. I haven't linked in the show description for people to go ahead and watch it if they haven't watched it yet. But yeah, there's a player that nobody in this chat has ever heard of. I think I can speak for at least Jose and I. We had never heard of Lukić, and once I'm sure Jose had started hearing the name, okay, it's like, yeah, of course I know who this guy is, right? And it's like, yeah, I've heard this name a lot of times. But yeah, when you were going ahead and scouting him, what stands out to you? I guess some fans have said, oh, well, Transfer Market says that he's a 10. Some have said, oh, he can play as an 8. But in reality, that seems not to be the case. He seems to be a 6, if anything.
Yeah, I'd probably, based on the activity that he provides at the 6. I used to love the term an all-action midfielder, and he definitely, for me, he's just an absolute animal, and he has a lot of like the aggression and the fight that like Carnell's going to really want out of a midfield. And so he's not just like a simple deep lying playmaker. Like, he will make things a lot of things difficult for opposing midfielders. Like, if the ball passes by him because he's not in like the trajectory, he's going to be sprinting after it to make sure he's doing all his recovery runs. He's not just going to look at the back line and hope that they take care of it. So he's got really good work rate, the aggression, like I said, that all action style, definitely not afraid of a tackle. And I mean, it's been commended that his mentality is just very sharp. And, I think another note to it, not really an on the field thing, but it translates to on the field. But, he's actually a good English speaker. So, there's obviously concern sometimes where like players will come in and the adjustment that it takes, whether it's in a new home or obviously on the field, like the expectations will be understood. The coverage that he'll be able to provide for the midfield is going to be very good. And when you bring in a player like that, I think we've talked about it pretty much all week. Not only is it him, but his effect on the other players in the midfield will help so much. And then even the back line, like he's a good back line protector. He'll come back and help defensively. He definitely has no ego about doing all that dirty work. And I think that's like a part of the last season that, was kind of missed out on. And that's, dropping goals early. And from a coaching perspective, you cannot just sit there and watch and let your back line just get overwhelmed. If one of your midfielders that you're supposed to be responsible for breaks by you and you're not aiming to get goal side right away, then it's a potential disaster all the time. And so the back line should be pretty happy with the move as well. But also, Dan Lee being able to lengthen his stride and cover more ground and not really be anchored too much to a more defensive role because he's more effective box to box. So, between that and getting him through a training camp finally in a new system and around the players for a longer stint of time, like I think his effectiveness this year will improve quite a bit, and fans should be pretty excited to like that midfield's actually pretty strong on paper for me. Because not to ramble too much, but like it's kind of crazy. I didn't think I don't know if I have to explain this, but from a scouting perspective, you're not just like looking for players that are high value to spend a ton of money to just please the fans. You are building around a system. There's very few teams in the MLS that can build around players. You're building out a system, so you're listing out every position, every attribute you need to make that formation work, and you're finding a set of attributes. And that's what Lukić does. He fits the criteria. And just because he was, we'll just say 400K and not 4 million, doesn't mean that he's not a good player. Like, just a quick anecdote, like one of his teammates last year moved away from Spartak and went to the Russian top division and has since become one of the better defensive midfielders in that league. And his price or his valuation has doubled or tripled. So, and I think the last point, and then we can keep going back and forth, but unlike the Galazzo show, they were talking about like, is the MLS a selling league? And it's like, yeah, because we don't, Jose with his Manchester City jerseys, like UAE isn't owning any of these teams. And even if they did, the rules still exist. So they'd run into the same problems as anyone else. The only way you get around those is the dark arts of finance in the league, where you can get companies to pay parts of salaries so they're not on the books officially. And, if Union fans are upset, it's like, well, maybe call up Bimbo and be like, hey, can you pay, $5 million a year on top of some guy's salary so it looks like it's good to the league, but then we're getting a super high profile player. But like it ain't all ownership. And I know everyone's gonna like crap on me because I pointed the finger away from Sugarman, but like, I mean, this isn't FIFA video games. You can't literally sign any player you want. You can't rig things to to bring in your dream player. There's a lot of hurdles in the way. Like, there's so many things that go on behind the scenes that a lot of fans just won't ever understand. We could probably get into that a little bit more, like a couple different hiccups along the way. But that's kind of my soapbox rant for now.
All right, so I'll throw it to you, Jose. Michael had left this comment a little bit ago. He says news for him came out literally after the McGlynn news, so I assume people expect him to be a 1-for-1 replacement. And the way I look at it is, so I see Mike Thomas, a lot of comments coming in. I totally get it, and I think a lot of fans feel the same way that you do, that they're upset with, not a high-profile player coming in here, or at least a high-spend player coming in here, but spending $400,000 on a guy who may become the next Jose Martinez for you, which this whole fan base adored Jose Martinez. And yeah, I saw your comment where you said, "Yeah, on paper, this team looks weaker than it did last year." Yeah, we talked about 10 players have left between last transfer window and this current transfer window, and you've officially only replaced them with one player, and Jan Glavinovic. Jose reported that the union will eventually announce the signing, or in the process of finalizing the deal for Jovan Lukić, and then a whole bunch of homegrown players that Jose announced. Hasn't been officially announced by the club yet, but I understand that doesn't make this fan base happy. I understand that some fans will say, this is how the Philadelphia Union operate, and there's no need of getting upset, because at the end of the day, they have a reason to do things the way that they do them, and they're not going to change it anytime soon. And I think fans should expect the union to continue to operate this way, and it doesn't mean that fans need to be accepting of this. And if you're not accepting of it, then it's like you don't spend your money on tickets, right? You don't buy merchandise, you don't go to games and everything. That's how you protest if you're unhappy with the way that things are run. But I mean, at least Ernst Tanner, Bradley Cornell, they're being honest with the way that they want to play. And Jack McGlynn doesn't fit into this high octane style of soccer that the Homer said the New York Red Bull Unions, because I saw Kevin Kincaid's latest article with the picture of the Union logo with Red Bulls. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they want to play a Red Bull style of soccer, and Lukić fits that. And Danley John Jock, which a lot of people thought that, okay, he'll be the sixth, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think Lukić is going to be replacing Jack McGlynn. I think it's Danley who's replacing Jack McGlynn. You already brought in Danley last year for what, close to $2 million, and now Lukić is going to be that replacement for Jose Martinez.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add in terms of the scouting. I think Mark did a really good job in terms of voicing it just now with us, and as well as his video. So I recommend you all like and subscribe to his YouTube channel, right? It's a really, really good, thorough video. And kudos to the Serbian league, Mark. How good their video recaps were as I was watching some of them beyond your video. I'm thinking to myself, holy smoke, some of these are better than even MLS and Apple's power behind it. And your comment could not have been any better too, Mark, in terms of, the dark arts of, sure, like, UAE backing a lot of this, right? Like whatever happened in 2008 with, Sheikh Mansour coming to City and turning their fortunes literally around. But, it's, to me, it's interesting because there are many types of fans, and the ones that I'm so fascinated by in terms of the dichotomy is those that make fun of those that are plastic, but then the plastics that want to maybe try to create talent themselves. And it's like, oh man, like it's a push and pull and a friction type of argument that it's hard to find teams that do both. And that's why I'm so intrigued to follow along this season more than ever before, considering how spoiled Union coverage and fans have been over the past couple of years in terms of those incredible runs to almost championships, as well as, progressing pretty far into tournaments. To see what some of these high profile players that just joined the league, right? All of the players that Atlanta have brought in this year, all of the players that Austin have brought in this year, and sort of see, right? Like, are they going to provide what they're being, paid for in terms of transfers as well as salary? So it'll be I'm intrigued to see how I shape this project. I may ask the help of someone like Ali and some other folks in the chat and contacts that we have in terms of how do we, not anecdotally, not opinion based, but rather data driven. How can we actually make a point of this, that sometimes, what you pay on a transfer doesn't translate to good or top of the line performances, right? Is there a connection? Maybe, probably, and that's fine. But I'm also intrigued to see, well, is it really 1-to-1 every single time? Probably not. But I'm excited to see Jovan. I think he is, much like Martinez, someone who's coming, hopefully somebody who's coming out of nowhere from a league that's lesser known to Toronto FC. Thank you, John. That's another one, right? See how poor that whole experiment went and how much they paid for players. I'm excited to see the player and not cast judgment before he even sets foot on the field, because I can't imagine, and this is me in a soapbox in a way, but like, I can't imagine being that player and seeing the commentary about him. He hasn't even put on a jersey for media day probably at this point. So like, oh man, that's very tough. And players are getting paid handsome salaries compared to the average American, and that's also something to keep in mind, and not think with our wallets. But I hope that fans can see for what it is, which is, it's a player who's coming to America to better his life and better his family, and just give him a shot before you start throwing them into the garbage bin because their resume is not what you expect or what you want to be brought into the union. Just have some trust, maybe. And that's hard for people. And I get that they're disillusioned by everything that has happened over the past literally 12 months with one season of not doing well. But I don't know, just maybe my 2 cents. Maybe I'm too positive in a way, or half full.
It's a good comment there by John too. More bottom spending teams made the playoffs last year than top spending teams. Good point.
Well, if you're not done with the positivity yet, I can add some more. No, I think, even it was funny seeing some of the Taylor Twellman stuff today. He was like ripping fans for like, now you think that Cucho was awesome, because when he first came to the MLS, everyone was ripping on him like, oh, it's because Watford got relegated and he's retiring to the MLS and all this stuff. And, there's always negative things to say about any player that comes into the league. So like, you could bring in Scott McTominay to the union, and what if he just doesn't pan out? And it's like, oh, we wasted all this money on Scott McTominay, or oh, United sucks and he's sucked ever since. And I, like, there's always going to be negativity. And to build on to Jose's thing, I think, from my opinion as a fan of really any team I support, it's, and a former player, like, think about even the definition of supporter. Support. It's not rag on your guys. Like, every team, the ideal state is you're in the locker room, every fan out there will go to war with you, and that you have your fan base's backing, even if you might not be their favorite player, or even though they would love to have a superstar in there, you got to still support the guys. If you love the team, you got to support these guys. That's like always been my opinion with everything. And because like in the grand scheme of things too, like you just can't afford to make your home stadium feel like an away game where you feel like your whole fan base is against you, because everyone's always saying like, oh, these guys suck, we need new players. Well, when you hear that, it's like, are you gonna do a full field sprint to save a counterattack? Or are you gonna be like, fans think I suck anyway, so whatever. And like, it's hard to fight when you got no real support. So I know like Twitter is obviously a little different than reality sometimes, but like, everyone knows how tough Philly fans are in general, like across all the sports. But I mean, to act like the existing roster isn't talented, that they aren't always going to get, like, they're still a young group. And yeah, they had a couple bad months, but to think it's all doom and gloom and that these players are just like never going to achieve anything, they're at a good stage in their career where you should have optimism that they're going to be better this year individually and as a collective if they have this new methodology and they're coached throughout all preseason. They know what it takes to earn a starting spot. You got to do the job. And if it all comes together, you know, but like I've always said with you guys, we always joke, like, you know, always positive, optimistic. If it all comes off the rails, it's more about how can they improve? What can they fix? Not get rid of them all. They're terrible. Because it's just not, that's just not how this league is ever going to really operate.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points there and a lot of comments. I mean, a lot of comments coming in. I appreciate you guys. And definitely let your voices be heard and definitely share your opinions and whatnot. The one thing that I keep going back to is so many comments that I have started here that I wanted to bring up. I guess the one comment that Mike said was, but you factor in Crowns up Martinez, Flock, McGlynn, Elliott departures, it's not balanced. And again, my argument would be the Union have officially signed one player, and the window for MLS doesn't close until April 23rd. And so the January window open on January 31st, and you have plenty of time. And this is typical of Ernst Tanner to do his deals late. And I get it, right? MLS is starting on February 22nd, and you want players in there in preseason now getting acclimated to their team, to the league, and just all the travel and everything like that. And so I totally get that. But at the same time, too, right? It's not like the transfer window is closed. And Ernst Tanner said it multiple times that, look, not including the homegrowns, we're going to add in every single position. We're going to add in defense. We're going to add in midfield. We're going to add in the attack. We're not going to add the goalkeeper. You don't need a goalkeeper. You have Andre Blake and Andrew Rick did well with Union too, and he did well at times, especially that New York City game. So you're fine with the goalkeeper aspect. And so I would expect maybe another signing here coming up once Union make the Lukić deal official. I mean, look, there's still plenty of time for deals to get done for the Union. And so I get it, right? It's easy to get angry with how poorly the season went last year, and the town hall maybe didn't go as well as some people expected. It feels like it was just a lot of blank answers, but at the same time, it's like, what else can I say that Jose and Mark haven't said, right? It's like, give Bradley Carnell a chance. Hasn't even coached his first official game with the club. Sure, preseason games, Union haven't won a single preseason game yet, but it's preseason, right? Those players are getting used to the way that he wants to play. And so I don't, take those results too serious yet. And right, it's going to take time for those guys to just get used to the style of play. And then the other comment that I wanted to bring up by Mike, and I'll go back to you, Mark, for this. He said he might be good. I hope he's good, but his resume is nothing to be excited about. And when you look at Lukić, that's who Mike's talking about. He's 23 years old. He's played in 153 games, 8 goals, 4 assists. 153 games at 23 years old. I saw the argument by some people on social media, well, this is the season that he first started 15 games this season in Spartak in Serbia. And yeah, fans still don't think it's a great enough resume. And so the question I posed to you, Mark, was like, I saw people complain that he went to the Austrian Bundesliga after being in Serbia, and then he went to the second division in Portugal, then back to Serbia. And fans look at that as, yeah, that's not a great resume. That's not great. He's taking a step down. He couldn't hack it in the Austrian Bundesliga. He's going to a second division in Portugal, and now he's back to Serbia. I mean, what do you have to say for fans that don't think that's an impressive resume? And I know you and I had talked on the phone prior to this, but it's like, cut the guy, give the guy some slack, right? Give him a break, right? And it's like, maybe for whatever reason, it didn't work out for him in some of those other leagues. And so now he's finding his feet again. And it's better for the player to go into a spot where he's constantly playing as opposed to going into a team where he's sitting in the bench and not developing.
Yeah. And that's like the big thing is just how a lot of these are early stage moves, like it's all about development. So there was probably opportunities that he might not have had. And that's why he had to like seek other opportunities in different countries to really test his level and then come back and start showing it on the top tier. But like, there's been players currently in the league, like Austin FC just signed a guy last summer from the Serbian league for $7 million. And Hamidou Diop, who just came back from a loan, he was in the Serbian first division on loan for the last half of this year, or 2024. So like, people can rag on like leagues that they don't watch, but and honestly, I've been trying to think of like a career that it's not simply the resume. It's what skills do you have? What attributes can be like attributed to you? And it's more about that, because like if we're going off a resume, how would any, and this is kind of like a societal thing. It's like, every team or every employer wants 10 years of experience, but I'm like 23. I know I can do the job, but like, you're just going to be, you're not going to be allowed to go work for them because you just haven't served enough time somewhere else. And like, going back to the style of play, I don't know what the fans might expect on, like, I'd love to hear a bunch of names of players that they think are available that should be targeted, because, it's always after a team signs like Latte Lath, there's like, we should be doing that. And it's like, well, I mean, just give us a name of somebody that you're interested in, and like, just to do a little exercise. But, like I said, alluded to earlier, there's so many challenges within, attracting talent to an organization. And a lot of things are just out of your control. How many like offers have been extended to players, and, you're competing with all these teams around the world for the signing of one player. Sometimes you'll have an agent who sees the deal, and it could be an unknown future superstar. And it's like, the Union are interested in this guy? Let me take this deal and start shopping it around to other clubs, being like, the Union are interested. You should be interested too. And then you get snaked out of that deal. So it can be challenging. And yeah, there you go, Matt. He was waiting for forever to reference Gazdag coming from a proverbial nobody in a league that no one really watches. So, and from my scouting experience, there's great players anywhere you look, and you can find really amazing players for like almost no money at all. You don't really need to be having this price tag bias. Like, just because a guy is brought in for $22 million, he still has to take the same field that everyone else does. So, players are as prone to flopping than ever. And it's like, you're probably better off finding the value players, because at the end of the day, too, with going back to the selling league concept, it's a case where you want appreciating assets. It's an investment. Every player is an investment, just as the same way outside of soccer. You're not buying at the highest value unless like you got kind of FU money, and no one in MLS can really afford to do that. So appreciating assets, you can't be spending too much money on depreciating guys. Because again, just it was a day of Taylor Twellman, I guess. But he was saying how rare it is to bring in a guy for anywhere north of $6 million and ever see a recuperation of that money in an outgoing transfer. And, people can't be burning too many of those transfer fees for players that they can get. Because again, it's all about attributes, and you need younger players for this style. So you're not going to get a 30-year-old who you might have seen before play for, I don't know, Huddersfield. Like, I don't know. It's the fun challenges. Like, I love scouting, so it's fun for me to see what all these teams are doing and the type of players they can find from random places. But yeah, everyone's got to take the field, same as anyone else, and not losing a ton of money for a similar attributed player is promising, in my opinion.
For sure. So as we get ready to wrap up the episode, it's gone as long as I thought it would, and maybe it's probably going to go a little bit longer. And so, Jose, you've been quiet there for a little bit, so I'll go ahead and bring up the last thing that we can talk about, right? And that's where the Union's current depth chart is. And maybe we've already talked about that throughout the night with only one official move. It looks like there's deals in the works. The Union haven't officially announced all the homegrown deals, haven't announced the Lukić deal yet. But at the same time, right, I mean, like, deals are coming, and I get it. Again, I totally understand the fans' frustration of, well, look, the roster is worse off than it was last year. And Mike Thomas isn't the only one that feels that way. There's plenty of people on social media. There's people, I'm sure, that aren't even on social media that feel the way. And I'm sure there's probably people here on this fan base that don't even know that Jim Curtin's been fired yet. So they're going to show up to Subaru Park and be like, wait, where's Jim Curtin? Well, look, they fired him in November, December. So got a lot of catching up to do. But as things stand with the Union's current depth chart, I'll go ahead and pull this up here. Hopefully I don't mess it up this time, but this is kind of where I see things for the Union. Hopefully you guys can see this on the screen. If I have to zoom in there a little bit, I will, but
I want to zoom in a tad.
But if you go ahead and look at how I have it highlighted, hopefully that's better because I'm looking at it from the Excel sheet as opposed to the stream. I have it highlighted with the homegrown players. I have it highlighted with the international players. The Union have 7 international spots out of 8 because don't forget they traded one of those spots during the season to Nashville SC. Sorry. And so I'll be curious to see, right, if the Union do, in fact, and I believe Ernst Tenner that he'll go out and bring in a striker. I'd be curious if it's an international player, or I'm curious if a player like Jesus Bueno, a Oliver Zemla, Ty Baribo maybe are able to get their green card this season and open up a roster slot if the Union are, in fact, going to go out there and get another international player. But as things stand, this is what the current roster looks like. Again, I know the Union haven't officially announced a couple of these players I have listed on here, but yeah, again, fans look at this and say, yeah, this is a weaker roster, but I look at it as, okay, look, Kai Wagner is a player that loves to get forward on this team on the left-hand side, and Jack McGlynn was a player that liked to get forward too, and so then you had nobody covering on the left side of the field, and now you put Danley over there. That allows Kai Wagner to continue to get forward, and you'll get that defensive cover on the left side of the field. You have a strong tackler of the ball and Lukić there in the middle to protect that back line that was all over the place last year. And so when you look at this roster, Jose, I think all three of us can agree this isn't going to be the final roster come April 23rd.
22nd. Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, you're right. Or I guess 21st, right? That's when it locks, right? The day before the first game. Is that when the rosters have to be eligible, whatever. Anyways, I think you're absolutely right that they need a striker to see Anderson and Donovan be the first up. Doesn't obviously give a whole lot of confidence, and I'm intrigued to see if that is where they go and who they bring in. Oliver Semlis, I understand it, should be able to get his green card fairly easily, considering his time at Marshall and how long he's been in the country. But I think everything else looks about right. Excited to see the role that Bedoya takes on, and hopefully it's a back seat to allow Quinn to continue to explode. And I really am excited to see Danley at that number 8, at that 8 position there on the left, and just letting him rip with how quick he is at closing space and how quick he is at eating space while he's running on stride.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, anything to add here for the Union's depth chart? Expect more signings, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I'd expect. I mean, obviously, I just covered like there's a lot of things that need to happen to get the right guys, and you just can't sign anybody to walk in. But yeah, I think between any of the position groups, because striker obviously to balance out the Baribo partnership. I could even see an additional midfielder coming in, and then center back as well, just to kind of help out with some depth. And I don't think we can. We don't need to bother guessing at the type of fee that is going to be ballparked. So. More nobodies from nowhere, but that's how I like it, because I just love that stuff. I think it's so interesting, and like it's my style, so I tend to like it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many soccer players out there in the world, and it is interesting to see how good team scouting departments are. And I would also argue too, just because a team signs a player and it doesn't work out doesn't mean that it's a bad player. It just means that it wasn't a fit. And we've seen time and time again players go from one team to another and they go back to succeeding. And so I'm excited for this season. I think there's a lot of fans, again, and we've seen the comments, and there's other shows too where people are negative, and the comments are still raining in there too of negativity. But at the end of the day, right, this team hasn't played an official game yet. Yeah, preseason remarks, take it for what they are. A lot of comments coming in tonight about, it being annoying watching the Union sell homegrown talents and them really not getting a chance to play in Philadelphia. And you had touched on it a while ago, Mark, about how MLS is a selling league and it's always going to be a selling league. And I've argued it on this podcast. Majority of the leagues in the world are selling leagues, and there's nothing wrong with that. And again, it goes back to your scouting. Once you sell these players, whether it be homegrown players or young players or what have you, how good you're scouting to go out and replace those players. And so the Union, I trust their scouting department, and I trust, the players that they've sold and players that they've brought in recently. And I don't see that changing.
Well, I will say that a selling league is more fun, I think, than a retirement league that the MLS used to be. So it's still there's still some aspects of that, but I'd much rather our, home country's league be known for having exciting, young, expansive play and develop a lot of players and have them go on to places. Because I think, we're still not at it. The better this league does financially, the more the salary cap can start going up, and then we can really start growing the league the way we want. But, a lot of these leagues just have decades of head starts. So I'm happy with the direction. I, again, got to support your guys.
All right, so two more questions I'll pull up. Evan says, will the 2 preseason games on the 7th and 14th be streamed? Jose, as of right now, you're our solidified, streaming guy, finds all the details. I haven't seen anything announced yet. Nothing's been announced yet, right?
I highly doubt you will see a lick of gameplay from those games in Florida. If anything, seeing that it took the other opponent, both in terms of Slavia and AGF, to have their own streams, one paid and one that I had to listen to check audio for the whole time through a VPN. I can't imagine that the union set up a Facebook Live with a person behind the camera for these games. So get ready to read a wall of text, either from a site or a social media feed. So I would be very happy and very impressed if they were to put something together for a stream.
All right, Jose, we're sticking with you. John says, if they could make an offer for someone in MLS for cash, who would you like them to make an offer for? Go ahead, Jose. Name a name, anything, and then I'll go to Mark.
I think of teams that maybe just made big splashes in the striking sense that could probably do with getting away with letting someone go. I think maybe Sporting Kansas City. They just brought in a brand new striker from Los Angeles. That would make sense. I don't remember what the Austin situation looks like, but they obviously bought a whole bunch of striking forces in terms of Vasquez and I forget who else they got, but they got some good players. Anybody who made a big splash that would displace somebody, especially with the structure of only playing in so many leagues or tournaments this year, would make a lot of sense for teams like the Union to maybe go explore and have some conversations just in case.
Mark?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Yeah. Thinking hard because I was thinking of usually you could do a pretty good job. I don't know if there's any striker in the league that would actually be available. So I'd almost look at the center back group because I think you could find some pretty good center backs within the league.
For me, I think I would go with Mihailovic from Colorado. Never going to happen. But what about Evander, right? It looks like he's in the process of getting a green card, I think. Dinho Gazdag, he's a nice player and everything, but, I would like to see more of a chance creator, a shot taker. Yeah, I know Gazdag's a shot taker, but why not Evander, right? Nobody said we have to keep it realistic, so let's see what happens. Evan says Kai Kamar. Valerie says Diego Luna. That would be interesting.
I mean, if you could reunite Navarro with the guy who signed him, that'd be pretty cool.
Would be. But yeah, this episode
unrealistic.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, so many possibilities. Maybe Jose has the right thought. You look at the teams that have made big splashes already, and maybe you can get a cheap deal there. But this has been an hour 20 episode. I knew it'd be long, and you guys knew it as well. Ali, I see his comment. He says Henry Kessler, maybe. Tim Parker, I feel like would have been a nice free agent signing, but it looks like he's going back to New York Red Bull. So I don't know. We'll see. Again, plenty of time for the Union to get deals done. Jose, we'll go to you. Where can people find you on social media?
At Jose R. Nuñez 91, Substack's link there, and hopefully some good news here in the next week or two that I can share. Not player involved, but personal news that I'm excited about that I think developed pretty quickly over the past week. So I'm really excited.
Mark?
It's just my first and last name. So at Mark Kelkenberg, mainly just on Twitter. But if you're interested in very random YouTube scouting video highlights, that'd be the old firm of Kelken Sport. So yeah.
And you guys know where you guys can find the podcast from now. If you guys aren't following on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow @FreeKickPod, where we get your podcast, The Free Kick. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/FreeKickPod. Obviously, we're live on YouTube now, as well as Facebook and Twitter. Thank you, Jose and Mark, for bringing all your followers tonight to pay attention to the podcast. And check out the Substack for, the podcast, for the goals breakdown videos, and these live videos as well as my writing at thefreekick.substack.com. Lots of comments tonight, lots of comments that I wish we could have got
having another
to.
kid.
We both have met mine. We're set.
You're done. No baby. But so this has been The Free Kick. Until then, my name is Todd, and this is The Free Kick Podcast.